I'm Amanda Sandrick, and I am a new account sales director for Vivacity Infrastructure Group. A little bit about me, and then we'll get into our panelists. My company designs, builds, maintains, commercializes network infrastructure. So we basically build the internet for both public and private entities. This topic is near and dear to our heart right now, especially with the $65 billion in the infrastructure bill that'll be coming out through the federal government to the states to help expand broadband and close that digital divide, which is a much needed resource that's needed, and especially after the pandemic. That was definitely a light was shown on the lack of reliable internet connectivity, especially in the school systems. I'm sure everybody's kind of experienced that in one way or another. So today, I have a team of broadband leaders from various cities and municipalities, South Bend, City of Chicago, as well as Hopkins Park, Illinois. I want to turn it over to our panelists quickly to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with some questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Hodge. I'm the mayor for the Village of Hopkins Park. We have about 700 residents in our community, about 2,500 residents in our township, and about 52 square miles.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here. Jared Policicchio. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy in the Mayor's Office for the City of Chicago, and one of the core members of our team that's working on broadband access in Chicago.
Hi there, Maddie Rogers. I am the Director of Civic Innovation for the City of South Bend. My portfolio includes a slew of different projects, and most importantly this year is broadband.
Awesome. So I'm going to get going with some questions, just kind of probe you guys and see the various answers that we'll get. What are some obstacles when it comes to financing broadband projects? And we'll start with you, Mayor.
Well, for a small community like the Village of Hopkins Park, there's over $42 billion out there. Our concern is, how do you access that money? And normally you would need a grant writer or something of that nature. My community, we don't have grant writers. We have to depend on volunteers. Fortunately, we did have a volunteer group write a grant for us, the CDC, and we've been very blessed to get a grant from Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who designated over $3 million for our community. And so we just happened to be fortunate that she was in place to serve our community.
That's wonderful.
I'll add one thing on. And actually, Mayor, even though Chicago is obviously a large city, I think I'm going to offer something that's actually not completely dissimilar. And I think the point I would make is that this is a relatively new area for most cities, even large cities. That's not to say that that's the case in all situations. There are definitely cities that have been focused on broadband access for quite a long time. If you're knowledgeable of the field, city of Chattanooga, for example, in Tennessee, has been at this for decades. But for the most part, this is a realm that really got supercharged for cities, and speaking for Chicago and for Mayor Lightfoot, in the heat of the pandemic. And so I flag that as connecting to financing, just in the sense that this isn't wastewater, this isn't public safety, this isn't something it's been a core function for Chicago, at least for 100 years. So we're deep into it now, but we've had to gear up our capacity to really delve into this policy area, and obviously, as a consequence, pursue funding opportunities. There are a lot of funding opportunities, as you all know, but we've also had to stand up the ability to manage and pursue them.
And the difference between the city of Chicago we've deployed broadband in large cities as well as rural communities all around the U.S. And the different needs and how to go about deploying broadband is going to be extremely different from Hopkins Park to Chicago to South Bend. Maybe you guys can just give some examples of things that you've been talking about within your own municipalities. Maddie, I know we got to get to you too. That, some challenges that you've come up with, in your own municipalities.
I'll let you go first.
Well, I guess I'll start with I'll start it off with just briefly talking about how did we get into this world. So for us, and this is again not dissimilar to a lot of large urban cities, especially. We got started with a program called Chicago Connected. Chicago Connected is, I would argue, sort of a predecessor, a precursor to the federal ACP, what is now called ACP program. So Chicago Connected is a subsidy partnership program with two ISPs, and it really came about in the heat of the beginning of the pandemic when Mayor Lightfoot and leadership quickly realized that there were thousands of children at CPS that didn't have a way to learn through remote learning. And so it was one of those, like many parts of the pandemic for local officials, one of those sort of just all night, like, how can we pull this together types of moments. And so we now have a program that serves about a little short of 80,000 families, CPS families. It's about $50 million of funding, which is joint through philanthropic funding as well as CPS slash federal funding. And now we're sort of transitioning toward, we're no longer in that emergency moment, and we're thinking more broadly about what does the landscape for this policy work at Chicago look like. The Chicago Connected program will continue on, though, for the time being. So it's not that we're leaving behind what we started with, but we're taking a step back to sort of strategize more broadly around this area.
So for us, it's a little different. So now you have $3 million. How are you going to manage that funding? You're a very small community. You have to have somebody manage it. Fortunately, the Kankakee County chairman stepped in, and they're going to help us manage that project. Then you have to go out and find yourself a internet provider, somebody that's going to put the infrastructure into the ground. And so we're in that process right now. And once you have everything in the ground, then you have to encourage your residents to take advantage of the technology. So that it's not only a benefit for them, but for their children, for their grandchildren, so that they'll be competitive in the workforce.
Yeah, if I could add, it's that last piece of actually getting people connected that is most important.
It's an education.
Yes, yeah, exactly. South Bend is in some ways still in the emergency era where only 46% of our census tracts have fiber. About 30% of our residents aren't connected to any kind of at-home internet. Obviously, as many other communities, this was just exacerbated during the pandemic. And we have some emergency measures that we've deployed, hotspots to students in schools. We are standing up our own private LTE network for another layer of connectivity. But right now, as it is, only 46% of those census tracts have fiber. So we are looking forward to these broadband funds coming through as being one of the first investments that South Bend has ever had into fiber. We laid our first fiber in 2016. We were kind of late to the game. So this is really our first big push. Because so many census tracts don't have fiber, it's actually very easy for us to find where we want to use this money, but it's that last piece of actually getting people connected to it that's going to be the most difficult, that we're already trying to lay the groundwork for now to get people access to these hotspots, to this private LTE, to get trained up on digital literacy so that when time comes they have the opportunity to have broadband, then they'd be more digitally literate in order to use it.
We kind of covered this already, but maybe can go in a little bit in further detail. How did the pandemic impact your community's need for a better broadband? And then you talked about a little bit of some of the things you did, measures you took to get the communities connected.
Well, this was a huge hurdle for us. Our superintendent did an awesome job of getting hotspots. Unfortunately, the hotspots didn't work at one point, so he had to look at other technology. One of the things that many parents had to do was they had to drive their vehicle and park in the local school, at the local school and at the local library just to get a signal so their children could get a signal to do their homework. Unfortunately, I can say that there's a number of children that probably did not receive nowhere close to the level of education that they should have during the pandemic.
Similarly, so we also gave out hotspots. If I could plug T-Mobile's Project 10 Million, they were a great partner that we are still actually deploying hotspots to students. Well, one thing we learned during the pandemic in deployment of hotspots, expansion of our South Bend Open Wi-Fi, is the need for different kinds of connectivity, which we did not expect. So when we first launched kind of our hotspot program, we launched, you can either get a hotspot or we will pay for your Comcast Internet Essentials. This was before the emergency broadband benefit that's now Affordable Connectivity Program. And nobody wanted Comcast Internet Essentials at the time. So after digging around, asking a lot of our constituents, this hotspot, I mean, it's easy, you can turn it on, but broadband is the future, and we really want more stable internet connection. And we learned that the reason the majority wanted hotspots is because it's easy, it's simple, nobody has to come into your house to turn on your Wi-Fi. A lot of the families that we were servicing are renting or are moving frequently. So, I've moved around with an internet service provider, and it's kind of annoying to have to call and change around your address. It may take 2 weeks to actually get it stood up, and imagine doing that while also having children in school during the pandemic. So we seeing this kind of reaction to hotspots and being attracted to hotspots versus something more stable like broadband introduced the need for different kinds of connectivity in our community, which then led us to stand up this private LTE, which we see right now as Band-Aid solutions or introductory solutions to when we eventually do have broadband in these additional census tracts and laying fiber elsewhere, so that hopefully by that time they'll be used to using the internet.
That's great.
I won't say much more. I'll just put a fine point on what I've kind of already said, which is for us, what did the pandemic do? I mean, to put this issue on the map in a really serious way. I wasn't working on this, and at the time, it's not that we weren't tracking internet access in Chicago, but the urgency of it was just highlighted in such a stark manner that I think. If Mayor Lightfoot were here, she would say that this is one of the initiatives and the work that she's the most proud of over her term. And so, yeah, panels like this even, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure that the focus on broadband was there 5 years ago before the pandemic.
Okay. What is each community doing with regards to affordability?
Great question. Well, actually, right now, we are trying to investigate the affordability in light of the Middle Mile grant, the BEAD grant coming out, digital equity plans coming out. I know what I pay for internet. I know what kind of internet service providers are in my area, but we are interested and are actually hosting a roundtable soon with the local internet service providers and wireless internet service providers to understand what they would be interested in. If we were to lay dark fiber in this particular section of South Bend, what are you going to do with it? And how are you going to help us service the underserved communities and make it affordable? We've been personally pushing the Affordable Connectivity Program to as many people as we can, but who knows if that's going to be around forever? Who knows? Right. It's also only $30 a month, and when you have families that have 8 people in the home, you need internet that costs way more than $30 a month. So. We're talking to our internet service providers and to our wireless service providers to get their input and their desire to hop on our dark fiber networks and hopefully give, again, additional layer connectivity optionality for all of our families.
Awesome.
So I'll tick through four things. Affordability, like Maddie said, is paramount for us too. So first is Chicago Connected, which I already talked about. Chicago Connected is now The eligibility for it is any CPS student who is on free or reduced lunch, so it's pretty broadly available. So we're continuing to connect students to that. We have about 25 community-based organizations that work on outreach and connecting folks to that program. There's work that we've been working on along with Chicago Housing Authority on connecting the ACP program, the federal program. So that's the second thing I'd say. Third thing I'd say is a colleague of mine is coordinating, the mayor created a digital equity council, and there's a guiding group of community members and community leaders that have been convening community tables throughout the city over the past several months that's going to culminate in a digital equity plan sometime in the relatively near future. And affordability is certainly something, just like Maddie's saying, that comes up in those conversations. And then last thing I'll say is that we're really approaching, like I said a little bit earlier, with an open mind as to what some of the longer term projects are that we want to work on in addition to what we've done so far. So we have brought on board a technical consultant who we're going to be working with over the rest of the year to develop a strategic broadband plan that will inform how we approach the funding opportunities and using our own resources.
Okay, so I live in a disproportionately low-income community, so affordability is certainly a key to what we're looking at. And at this time, we're going through a process where we're evaluating different vendors that would come into the community to install the fiber and manage the system. And affordability is one of the things that we're looking at, because people can't afford a $150, $200 internet service when you're under the poverty line. So that's something we're evaluating at this time.
Great. Is your city looking beyond digital access? And what does that look like?
So again, we are looking beyond digital access. We're looking to educate our community to the importance of it and having access to it to take advantage of it. We have a lot of modern people there for sure that have Wi-Fi and different things of that nature, modern conveniences, but we have a certain segment of the population that does not. And it's going to be tough to educate them to take advantage of broadband. So we're looking forward to that opportunity.
Yeah, as I was mentioning earlier, with handing out these hotspots, handing out devices to connect to this private LTE is an introduction into the digital world for people who may not already have it. At the same time, we're also building up a decentralized outreach team ran by the city. So going to neighborhood associations or community organizations, nonprofits in each of the neighborhoods that we serve, and asking them to put together a team of resource navigators. There's been a lot of talk along with this broadband expansion about digital navigators. More broadly, in the city of South Bend, we're looking at calling them assistance navigators or resource navigators. So starting to get people enrolled in a lot of assistance programs and then going the extra mile to teach them how to use the internet to enroll themselves or how to further their own quality of life through using the internet. So we're just at the beginning stages of forming those kinds of teams and navigators, but that's our eventual goal.
Yeah, I'll just add that, certainly for us, access isn't enough. And even when you unpack what does access mean, right? If you mean what the FCC's broadband maps mean, well, much of Chicago has formal access. Yet, just like Maddie was talking about in South Bend, we have neighborhoods in Chicago where 40 to 50% of households don't have broadband in their homes, regardless of whether they actually have access. So it's about having a connection, an actual connection. And then being able to meaningfully use it to empower yourself and your family. We've heard really transformative stories about families that have been able to get home internet through Chicago Connected. We have a partnership with Coursera where not just the students themselves, but their parents and their other household members can learn how to use the internet and how they can empower themselves in seeking what they're looking for in their lives. So it's definitely more than just access for us.
Awesome. Last question, and I'm going to change it up a little bit because we kind of touched upon a lot of this already, but with the push for better broadband connectivity, do you think it is important to also be educating communities on what this utility will mean for them? And I'm going to take it a step further. Should we be doing it through the schools, like as an education on what digital equity, equality means?
So absolutely, we should educate our children in schools, and we are doing that. We had a special service put into our school where the kids could get quality connectivity, and we did that same thing for our medical clinic. And the children are taking advantage of it. I mean, and they're learning from it. We just need to extend that same train of thought to our older population, so they'll become introduced to it and take advantage of it, so they can be competitive as well.
Especially in terms of like telehealth and
Absolutely.
they're not necessarily know that the internet. Now with the pandemic, you don't have to necessarily go into a doctor's office anymore. Right. So there is some benefits there. Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I actually just want to put a fine. I really support that point. I think, we talked a lot about how the pandemic has accelerated focus here, but I think collectively there was not enough of a focus on how connectivity impacts senior populations. I really agree with that point. So I think it's not. I think that obviously, integrating digital literacy into schools are very important, but we certainly heard, and especially the conversations we've been doing, like I said, we're doing community conversations in preparing for a digital equity plan. It's been really instructive to hear from non-school age populations, adult populations, as well as seniors as to how they understand the need for digital literacy and how we can better connect them to opportunities.
Yeah, I'll echo the same kind of things. And in South Bend, to be frank, we've focused a lot on schools during the pandemic. I think many people did because students were doing e-learning. But at the same time, we had some particular neighborhood associations that were launching their own digital equity training or digital literacy training for senior populations. To be frank, though, we've mostly been focusing on school-age children. But kind of pros and cons of the pandemic, every school-age children was sent home with a Chromebook. We were one-to-one even before the pandemic. And personally, I've been out into the community and been to a lot of these events, getting people signed up for these kinds of programs. And there was a stark difference at the beginning of the pandemic when we would attend these kinds of events, and then 2 years later to go and see the parents who 2 years ago wouldn't be able to use a computer, their child would be typing for them, and then now to see many more people being able to use a computer. Maybe an impact that the pandemic had of being at home and only having this Chromebook available to them. So, but we are looking to, again, expand some of those neighborhood associations that have already been doing some digital literacy training with some of this new funding that's coming through.
That's awesome. It's great. Absolutely. I was going to open it up for questions, so.
So we talked about affordability. Do you guys have a agreed upon definition, or is this each community getting it? Like, what's affordable internet connectivity?
Well, in our community, some of the vendors that we've looked at, based on your income, it could be $0, it could be $10, it could be up to $40. Just depends upon your income.
I'm going to agree with the mayor. Yeah, we don't have a one-size-fits-all definition. So Chicago Connected, for anybody that applies a household, it's free for as long as that program's running. But I don't think we've concluded that there's also not a place as we continue building this out for low-cost models as well. So it's a great question, but I don't think we've necessarily settled on that there's a one particular number combined with speed that hits the mark.
Yeah, similarly, I think we're basing a lot of our estimates because of ACP. They have the $30 program, but we've seen a lot of people on the fringe who are just above that low income limit. They can't get ACP, but they still don't make enough money to justify $40 of internet. So we are launching speed tests in South Bend, or expanding on some speed tests that have been done in Indiana over the past year. With those speed tests, we're asking, how much do you pay for internet? So hopefully we'll get a better understanding of what the current cost looks like within South Bend, take that to the round table with our internet service providers and our wireless service providers, and hopefully having conversation and competition around the room can help drive the idea of affordability down.
But that certainly does not, for Hopkins Park, Pembroke Township, mean that $40 is going to be the ceiling. It just means that, depending on your income, you may qualify for that. But we have not got a vendor in place yet, so we don't know what our pricing will be.
It's along those same lines. Is there I think the FCC standard is 25 download by
25.3.
25.3.
Yeah.
Is that adequate?
No.
Well, if I may add, they do define with these new initiatives that 25.3 is no longer adequate. That if you're 25.3, you're considered unserved. If you're 55, you are underserved, and if you're 110, is what it is, then you're served. So those are the new standards with all of this funding coming through.
So when you're doing your speed tests, is that the kind of data you're collecting?
Yeah, we're collecting upload and download speeds, and then we're also asking for addresses and for the cost.
If you don't mind me asking, is it Ookla you're using, or what tool are you guys using?
We are using GeoPartners, which we are able to get access to because of our partnership with the Indiana Farmers Bureau. So the Indiana Farmers Bureau and also the Council of Governments in our local area, Michiana Area Council of Governments, they already ran speed tests a few months ago, which we were so excited to hear. We got the data, saw that there were only 100 speed tests in South Bend. So we are relaunching the survey to try to get more information.
That's great.
So I did do a speed test in the mayor's office before I came in today, so I could give some insight on that. It was 7.43 up and 1.4 down. So
Not quite adequate.
One last question, sorry. So you talked about having your own city-owned LTE. So if municipalities are not equipped to run their own LTE, have you guys tried working with any ISP to see if they're going to run to a private to an apartment that's underserved? If yes, what are the issues with you having to do?
Yes. So I'll clarify. The city of South Bend is not owning this private LTE. We have contributed some funding, so we'll benefit from the private LTE network coming up, but it'll be owned and operated by our local school system, targeted towards students. They'll get first priority, and then we will get second priority to put possibly our own South Bend Open Wi-Fi locations up, or to put up some sensors, like traffic sensors on the network. So it actually should be launching in the next 2 weeks. It is truly brand new. But to your second question about talking to ISPs about serving particular neighborhoods, that is coming up in these conversations that we're having. We are very fortunate in South Bend to have a not-for-profit dark fiber network that will be leading the conversation with these ISPs, where the dark fiber network will say, here's where we want to put it. Again, what are you going to do about it? Or, here's what we want you to do about it. Are you interested? Are you engaged?
So it'll be more of a private-public partnership.
Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions?
I just have one. So on the public works side, we tend to view water as a human right, trying to provide that service. How are the conversations occurring now in the boardroom now, with broadband access now kind of becoming more of a right? So diverting resources and trying to build that momentum within the community.
That's a great question. I think something that I want to say that's connected to that question, in the city of Chicago, this issue is very much also a racial issue. When you look at the data that we have on this issue, it is directly correlated not just with income not just with employment status, but also most specifically with the number of Black residents in the neighborhood. When you look at the top 10 most unconnected neighborhoods, they're all Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. And the mayor, if you follow what the mayor has focused on here in Chicago, it's been very much on, an equitable recovery out of the last few years. And so for us, it's absolutely reached the point where it's an essential service that's a human right. I think that again is kind of connected to the real sea change in how we think about this this tool, just like electricity, just like water.
It's become an essential utility.
So I can see from the president down that they're recognizing the need from this utility, this service in every community. It's a bipartisan issue, and bipartisan, they have answered the need best they can at this time. Certainly in my office and other local offices in our area, we see that this is something that every resident should have access to, and we're doing our best to get it in the field and in their homes.
All right, thank you so much.